I think investors were afraid that we were being pushed into the depths of a depression. A one-day rally won't fix a lot of technical problems, so I think it's reasonable for investors to be careful. But one thing that my friend Tom DeMark calls washed-out markets is, yes, I think some things truly were washed out, and that's what we're going to keep an eye on. I'm kind of in the opinion that this will carry on for a while. I think the markets have to rely on a policy direction from the White House that they can't always trust. So I think markets are going to put a bigger, but can they count on it? To me, even with these new tariff rates, there is still a cap. Do I think stocks will be simple from here? I think it's going to be very hard. But I also think that a lot of things got washed away because it's based on gut, or how near we are to a recession. We don't know how the reaction function works, like the Fed would claim. Yes, that's right. We don't know where it hits since it's a blunt tool. Tom Lee says that something significant is about to happen in the market, especially with cryptocurrencies like XRP, Bitcoin, Solana, HBAR, and many more. And in today's video, he's going to talk about Trump's policies, what he believes will happen soon, and a lot of other really intriguing things that he hasn't talked about in a while. So please hit the like button so that everyone in the crypto industry may see the video. Let's get right into it. During this time, they have made it clear that the Fed put isn't really in play until they have a better notion of what inflation will be. I mean, we just heard that again. So I think that markets need to rely on fundamentals and a policy direction from the White House that they can't always trust. So I think the markets are going to take a bigger risk. But can they trust it? I mean, the White House did say that they would be willing to change things up if things started to go wrong. Yes. But in the end, I don't think firms are going to be hurt as much as we first imagined. For example, even with these new tariff rates, I still see the ceiling. So even if this is what's in place now for 90 days, I think there's a chance things might still improve from there. Of sure, it might be beneficial for US industries and US businesses might get certain concessions. So, do I think stocks are an easy way to get there? I think it's going to be really hard, but I also think a lot of things went lost. The result was worse than predicted because the markets were ready for, maybe something simple but not too harsh. And then the rates that were publicized and the ones that were given back were far higher than most people thought they would be. It's not unexpected that the market is still feeling the shock today. We had an opening gap that was 3.5% lower. And from that gap, we're a little bit lower, but stocks have mostly stayed the same. I don't really want to put it this way, but in a way, it's been a pretty orderly sell-off, even though it's been massive. And I think investors need to think about a few things over the next few days. Isn't that right? So I think it's quite evident that the White House wants all these other countries to be in a state of panic and instability. And then, at that time, I think, and this is just my estimate, that's when the White House says, okay, let's make a deal. So, of course, the stock market has to deal with this for the next week or so. So when Goldman Sachs put all together, they found that the tariffs would actually raise prices by 12.6%. For all the countries, that's $3.2 trillion in imports. That amount looks big, but it's very much what a lot of people believed was the worst-case situation, which is about 15%. The second thing people should remember is that just 6 or 7 countries actually important. There were like 100 nations identified, and I know people are probably upset because there are all these random countries that suddenly seem to have penalty rates for their products. But in the end, more than 70% of what the US buys comes from just 6 places: the EU, Mexico, China, Canada, Japan, and South Korea. To put it another way, there are Mexico, Canada, the EU, China, and then a group of countries that includes Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam. I think the US will do something with Canada and Mexico based on how those countries are doing. I mean, they're not going to have to pay these penalty tariffs anyhow, so whatever happens with the USMCA will happen. Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam are all basically allies of the US. I don't think they want to start a fresh trade war, you know? But, of course, Japan, Korea, and China were talking about a tech supply chain, so I guess that's out the window. So everything is lovely and dandy. We know that Tom Lee is highly optimistic about the future of cryptocurrencies like XRP, Bitcoin, and others, and, of course, the stock market. And he doesn't put too much weight on tariffs in his calculations. And to be honest, he's been really right thus far. But he hasn't talked about the Fed's rate reduction in a while and how they will affect what he expects will happen in 2025. This is quite important, since at first we anticipated the Fed would lower rates 5 times. That has now been changed to 2 times. Why is this? Well, their messages have changed a lot since Trump started putting tariffs in place, and Tom Lee does have some ideas on this. I'm going to show you this clip that will give you some additional important background information. Don't leave till the very end. But is it back? It's in the market for bonds. And can you trust it? Well, it's a different version of it. Isn't that right? Because it's instinctual, there's no level that will make a difference, and how close to a recession do we get? So we don't know how to handle the reaction function, like the Fed would suggest. Yes, that's correct. It's like a blunt tool that we don't know where it hits. Yes, but I know that US companies will be incredibly creative in the end. I mean, for example, if their import costs go up, they won't merely pay more for imports. They are going to be very creative about how to minimize costs, which means that AI spending should be a lot greater than automation spending. So, I guess it's excellent for tech for the next year. We could see fewer jobs, though, right? Yes. I would say that this also helps keep things stable, because if employment on Main Street are lost, I'm not sure we can say that these policies are helpful for Main Street. But I don't think it will be hard to get to any kind of arrangement there. Those countries can either choose to talk things over, fight back, or do nothing. And, of course, I would expect them to either negotiate or do nothing, not to get back at me. And, of course, I'm sure they'll talk it over. In the end, the EU and China are the 2 areas that will be most affected by this. That's the only thing I think anyone should truly be paying attention to. I think the EU is now thumping its chest and threatening that it will take measures against the US if it doesn't negotiate. And that's what I anticipate will be the main story in the news. And China, of course, will try to do the same thing, but China and the US have other things to talk about as well. China's hand isn't so weak, since, for one thing, it is a major supplier to the US. 2, China. There are a few deals that are important right now. One is the Panama Canal, and the other is TikTok. The third thing is that the US will need a lot of robots if it wants to perform any onshoring. China is the country that makes almost all of the robots, So I think China and the US should work together. China isn't going to just sit on the 70% tariff rate they have. Or, to put it another way, I think The math works out for China with the 47% exclusions. And, for the EU, that's $600 billion in imports and $120 billion in tariffs. I don't think Japan, South Korea, or Vietnam are going to start a trade war, though. I believe we can work things out with Canada and Mexico, and China, of course, does have cards. So the question is, if Europe, the EU, has $600 billion in imports, and that's where this is going to be a high-stakes game, the tax is either 10% or 20%. So, that's $60 billion. Is it worth taking $2 trillion out of the stock market today for $60 billion? That's the first thing that comes to me when I think about why I believe the US will be fine in the end, even though it seems like there's a lot of terrible news ahead. And to be honest, the longer I watch this play out, and the more I see the talks happen, the more I think Tomley is going to be right. There hasn't been a lot of inflation in the last 4 months. Even though these tariffs have been in place, been on hold, or been in talks, the markets have also had a great rally since February, after the crypto markets had a big crash. So this is absolutely amazing to see. I believe that more liquidity will keep coming. The Fed will soon conclude they don't need to worry and will lower rates because inflation is under control.